That is one of the witnesses to these extraordinary events this morning here in New York. Again, and I know that for many of you, you've heard this a lot, but I think it's important as people join us as they do in moments like this. They are coming in all the time, that there have been attacks in 2 American cities, New York and in Washington. The trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And there's, you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words. You can see large pieces of the building falling. You can see the smoke rising. You can see a portion of the side of the building now just being covered on the right side as I look at it, covered in smoke. This is just a horrific scene and a horrific moment. The president, who is in Florida today, is en route back to the White House. He took off a short time ago. The White House itself has been evacuated on the basis of what the Secret Service says was a credible threat on the mansion itself. We believe now that we can say that portions of both towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. Whether there were second explosions, that is to say explosions other than the planes hitting them, that caused this to happen, we cannot tell you. Rose Arce, one of our CNN producers, is on the phone. Rose, what do you got?
I'm about a block away, and there were several people that were hanging out the windows right below where the plane crashed, when suddenly you saw the top of the building start to shake, and people began leaping from the windows in the north side of the building. You saw 2 people at first plummet, and then a third one, and then the entire top of the building just blew up, and splinters of debris are falling on the street. Where I'm right now, there's a thick plume of smoke, and you can see crowds of people, including emergency service workers and police officers, running from the scene, screaming, and there's a school nearby where there were kids in the schoolyard. That has been emptied out, and they're running up the street now, too. The whole, sort of the neighborhood, I'd say several blocks up, is covered by this almost powdery smoke, little tiny pieces of building you can see just floating in the wind around it. It's almost like a huge cloud had kind of enveloped that part of lower Manhattan.
It is just one of those awful moments that you need to look at for a minute or two to absorb exactly what has happened. 2 of the most recognizable buildings in the city of New York have been attacked, and both of them appear to have collapsed, at least in part. The second of the 2 collapses taking place just a moment or so ago, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes ago. There are also apparently coordinated attacks that have taken place in Washington on the Pentagon. The State Department has been evacuated. Just a few moments ago, as we said, and perhaps 20 minutes after the first tower collapsed, we turned around and saw what looked like sparks falling, and then the top part of tower number 1 collapsing. These are shots from the ground of that scene. There have been frantic efforts to get people out of the tower. Now this is tape, and you can see now whether that was an explosion or exactly what happened that caused that second tower to collapse. We cannot tell you. CNN's Kelly Wallace is on the phone with us. Kelly, where are you? What can you tell us?
Aaron, I'm just about 4 blocks north of the location of where the World Trade Center was standing. I was actually en route to the command center, people really staring in disbelief. And then as you saw, of course, the pictures watching that tower come down, people just couldn't believe their eyes. Police then pushing people immediately, people turning around and starting running ways blocks away from the site. There is black smoke and is covering the air. You see people covering their mouths with some handkerchiefs and their coats, and basically, it's an unbelievable scene. Most of the people have gone. The police are really pushing people away. There were a lot of people as I was making my way down here, Aaron, people just staring, getting on the cell phone, crying, recounting stories where they sort of, basically had seen what happened earlier today, trying to get in touch with loved ones, very concerned. And then, of course, some people watching the other tower come down earlier, and then a group of people then watching this other tower come down, a woman passing me covered in soot. Basically, the sky is just black. You can't even see down to lower Manhattan from the vantage point right now. The police have cleared off all these streets, pushing people away. Police telling us if you have to get out of here to get out of here, pushing people away in garages. It's an unbelievable scene, Aaron.
You can see in this shot, our viewers can, a helicopter shot coming across the harbor, the Statue of Liberty prominent in the foreground, and smoke and devastation and tragedy in the background. A tragedy that continues to unfold, and one that still has many, many unanswered questions. We have a report now that a car bomb has exploded at the State Department. We are working to confirm that as well. Howard Safer is a former New York City Police Commissioner, the top police job here in the city, and he joins us for a few moments. Mr. Safer, what do you see? Look at that. What do you see?
I see something that's unimaginable. I see what is a police commissioner's worst nightmare. This is a situation that obviously was well planned, well coordinated, and the loss of life that's taking place down there is just incredible, and is going to strain the emergency services of this city to the hilt.
Are you hearing any specific information? Are you hearing anything about the number of injuries, the number of fatalities, the number of people in that building, those buildings? Are you getting any of that information from?
Well, I know there are 50,000 people who work in the World Trade Center. I know that every ambulance and every fire company in the city and has been called in and dispatched there. It's unimaginable, but the loss of life is going to be huge.
You're as familiar with the city's plan or plans for these kinds of incidents as anyone in the city. In all honesty, does the plan cover the scope of what appears to have happened here?
No, we have an Office of Emergency Management. The plans for responding to a disaster are probably as good as any in the world, but nobody ever would contemplate that we would lose the two World Trade Centers and in this manner.
Tell me what's happening there, would you guess, in the sense that what are police doing? What's the first thing that has to happen? Triage?
The first thing is triage. The first thing is to identify who can be treated, who cannot be treated, to get those ambulances to hospitals. Every hospital's emergency room is open and I'm sure working right now. And this is just a situation, it's like a war zone. And you have to logistically treat it like a war zone. You have to have your front lines, you have to have your support, and you have to have people who are constantly in there doing something. I was also fire commissioner before I was police commissioner, and it's no longer an issue, unfortunately, but a high-rise fire like that is almost impossible to fight.
At this point, would you say that every police officer, and there are what, 40,000?
There are 41,000 police
officers in the city have been called in?
Oh, every one of them. I know every firefighter has been called in.
And how many firefighters?
There are 14,000 firefighters, and I'm sure we'll be getting help with equipment from our adjoining communities as well. I mean, this is a logistical exercise that makes the first attack on the World Trade Center, relatively small.
Because of its scope.
Because of its scope.
And its place in the building itself, that it was high up in the building. Does that complicate things?
It does. Once you get above the 10th floor in a fire, it's almost impossible to fight a high-rise fire above the 10th floor, except by sending firefighters up there and using hose stands. Then you run into water pressure problems. I was just thinking about this not long after the World Trade Center bombing. The engineer who designed the World Trade Center told me that the World Trade Center was designed to withstand a 707 direct impact. Well, obviously, that wasn't the case.
It seems not. We are getting reports, and we are getting lots of reports.